Not good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenji Maeda. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Vancouver Professional Theatre Alliance. Welcome to today's webinar. Jacky Yenga I'll introduce in just a second. So I want to acknowledge that we're both on the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. But I also know that there are many of you who are watching this, whether it's on Facebook Live or inside Zoom, who are coming from all parts of Canada across Turtle Island. So welcome to all of you from all the different time zones during a time of isolation. And so one of the key things that we're trying to address here is how do we build a resilient community, and how do we better support each other during these times. This is part of our working through this series, where we have a number of topics that we are trying to address. Yesterday we had a lawyer, Martha Rands, talk a little bit about some legal questions or answer some legal questions. We have some other webinars coming next week and the following week as well, which I'll mention at the very end of this webinar. And just in terms of process here, I'm going to pass it over to Jacky in just a second to do to provide a presentation of sorts, and then there's going to be time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, and if you're in the Zoom platform, then go into the Q&A box, and then I will be looking at those questions and then referring to those as I ask those questions to Jacky verbally. If you're on Facebook, then please write it in the comments box, and so we'll take a look at those as well at the end of the webinar. And for those of you who require captioning, we do have a live captioner, so thank you to Marianne who's here as well. So if you need captioning, just turn on the caption option in your Zoom window as well. So at this point, Jacky, I'm so glad that you're here to be part of this conversation for the community. For those of you who don't know, so Jacky is the founder of the Spirit of the Village, which I'm sure you're going to just talk a little bit more about during the presentation or during the Q&A. But if you haven't had a chance to, the URL for Jacky's website is on the description of the webinar, and I would highly recommend watching her TEDx video as well, because it's really inspiring and a really great opportunity. We were just chatting that there's a section in the presentation where she engages everybody to sing a song, but we can't do it in virtual world where we turn on everybody's audio to do it. So you can't replace live performance. That's the key message. But at this point, I'm just going to pass it over to Jacky and let you take it from here for the next little while.
Thank you so much, Kenji, and thank you for to the Greater Vancouver Professional Theatre Alliance for making this available. Thank you, of course, to all of you for being here, for being together. And of course, lastly, Kenji already acknowledged the land where we are on, here, at least here in Vancouver. I'd like to take this opportunity in honor of the way we do things in my traditions. I want to honor those ancestors and to give them thanks for welcoming us to this land and for allowing us to live and work and dance and thrive and do everything that we want to do here. And I also want to acknowledge all of our ancestors for taking us to where we are today. And also, of course, most importantly, I want to acknowledge you and especially your soul. So I want to acknowledge the journey that every single soul has taken in order to be here together. So whether you are watching this live or whether you are listening to this or watching this later on a replay, we all belong. We all belong here. We are part of the same community for now. I would like to start with a reminder of what this was about. In the description, we were talking about building resilience and cultivating a community connections. And so I feel like it's important to have a reminder of what resilience is about. So let me read what I found. It's very short. Resilience is really the capacity or maybe the mental ability to recover quickly from difficulties, okay? So the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And in this context that we are on, really they go together, the resilience and the community cultivating community connections. And I'm going to explain why. And I'm going to come from my own cultural background. And what I share is what I know from experience. It's not something that I've learned from books or I've heard about. No, this is something that I know inside of, well, in my being. And so let me just briefly tell you where I come from and why I am doing this, basically. I come from a country called Cameroon. Cameroon is at the border between West and Central Africa. I was born in Cameroon and I grew up there, and until I was 9 years old. At 9, I was sent to live in France. And I was old enough, luckily for me, I was old enough at 9 to have been greatly impacted by the foundation that I got in life, by the way, well, what I learned about how life works and who we are as human beings and what we are here for. Old enough for that, but also young enough that when I arrived in France, I was able to also adjust to this new reality. You know, children are extremely resilient. When we talk about resilience, children are the masters of that. But I was also fortunate that I was able to go back home on a regular basis to my country. It was either every year at during the summer holidays, or every 2 years at the most. So I never really lost that connection with my culture of origin. And so what I'm sharing with you are things that not only come from my culture, but also that are things that we can adopt here that are designed to enhance everybody's life, because it's not just for us as Africans, it's for everyone. But of course, here we have a way of life that is very different from the cultural background that I'm coming from. And yet we can all benefit from that. And yet there are things that we can apply. And there are things that apply specifically to the community of artists that we belong to. So this is where I come from. What I share, my intention really, whenever I share, I share what I call the spirit of the village. And my intention really is always to inspire people to cultivate the spirit of the village. And what is that? The spirit of the village is a state of being. It's a feeling. It's a way of life. It's what makes us be who we are as human beings and belong. It is, to me, the spirit of the village. It is also about creating harmony between the natural, the human, and the spiritual community. It is one community. And community here, I need also to give you another definition at this point. My understanding of community, my definition, if I can put it that way, of community. When I was growing up in Cameroon, my community extended to a much bigger audience. It was not just about the people that were around me. My community also included nature around me. I was brought up to consider all the trees around me like my brothers and sisters. The land, Mother Earth, we call her Mother Earth for a reason. And we had such a strong connection with the land. We were aware of the fact that everything that we have, we owe it to Mother Earth. And so therefore we need to take care of her as much as she takes care of us. My community also was also comprised of my ancestors. For us, they are present in our day-to-day life. Science has proven that energy does not disappear. It simply transforms in a different way. So we had that understanding in a different way also from a cultural perspective. So that energy, when somebody passes away, they become an ancestor. It means that they do not cease to exist. They just exist in a different plane, a different dimension. And some people in the community have the ability to go from one dimension to another. And so to also bring the messages that our ancestors want to share with us to support us in our day-to-day life here in this reality. And they use different things. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment, because it will bring to light a different understanding, a fundamental shift in understanding the role of the artist. You see, from a traditional perspective, the artist is really No, sorry, let me go back a little bit. I was talking about community. Let me give you an example in order to understand really um, how we operate and our understanding of certain things, which is a little bit different from how we operate in the Western world. So whenever I speak and I talk about community, I always give this example. If you were to go to my village and you were to ask the elders in my village, what is community and how do we live as a community? They will have no clue what you're talking about, and they will tell you that they don't know, you see. That is because we don't have, in my language, for example, we don't have a word for community, and yet we live as a community. We don't have a definition of community because it's irrelevant. It's either you know something or you don't. And the knowing is not about knowing it intellectually. It's not about knowing the concept of something. It is about knowing something from a direct experience. That is what knowing is for us. So my elders, they might not know what community is. They might not be able to explain to you what community is, but they know community, you see? So we have to go to a place where we can know something in a way that is beyond just the intellectual understanding. I hope this makes sense for you. Okay, now about the role of the artist. When I arrived in Canada, I arrived in Canada on January 1st, 2000. So it's been exactly 20 years now, a little bit over 20 years I've been in Vancouver. And it was a new millennium, of course, completely new beginnings for me. And very quickly, as of course I connected to the artist community here, the Francophone community, the African artist community, I got to understand that there was a community of people here who are into drumming. There still is, but at the time it was a little bit different, and they were really interested in African drumming, especially, and they had this relationship of awe towards what we call a master drummer, at least here. And very soon I realized that the definition that people had of a master drummer here in the West is very different from the definition that I had, again, from a cultural perspective. Because here I found that a master drummer was someone who was considered to be a master drummer was typically someone who had a mastery of the drum, meaning that they could play really, really well. They knew a lot about rhythm and so on and so on. So they were around, basically, typically they tended to be the better drummer, the best drummer around. But that's not what a master drumming is in my culture, in the true tradition of African cultures. And by the way, I'm talking about African culture. In fact, I should really mostly refer to our culture as African cultures because we have many cultures. Africa is a continent. But to simplify things, I'm going to talk about African culture in general because there are many, many things that we have in common. And especially our understanding of what life is about from a traditional from a traditional perspective really is pretty much the same across the continent. So I'll talk about African culture. So in our culture, a master drummer, like a master dancer, master at anything, is not just somebody, it's not necessarily in a village, it's not necessarily the best drummer in the village. The master drummer will be someone who has a deeper understanding of their role as a drummer and who can come from that place to teach others. To teach what? Well, to teach about how to become a better human being, basically, and how to support this life that we all share. And they teach people from with their drum. They use the drum, they use rhythm to teach about life, really. So it's beyond just teaching the technicality of the drum. And so that leads me to the fundamental role of the artist in our community. You see, in order to understand a culture, you have to understand its paradigm. And I'm going to refer to an African speaker that used a really, really great analogy or example. He said, you cannot, for example, you cannot use the Mexican paradigm to understand Indian culture. I'm sure now it makes sense. So you cannot use I don't know, let's say the Chinese paradigm to understand African culture. In the same way, you cannot use the Western paradigm to understand African culture in general. So you need to understand the paradigm in order to better understand the culture. And in our paradigm, we use, well, the way to understand our paradigm is to observe not only our traditions, but some of our practices. And one of those practices is revolved really mostly around the arts, around our music, our rhythms, our songs, our dances, all of that. When you look at that and you look at, when you get to understand the reason why we do those, it takes a different meaning. Because for us, the art is not just about entertainment. It goes way beyond that. At the very beginning, the artist was really the healer of the community. And because of that role as a healer, the artist could not simply, you could not decide to become an artist. You see, you had to go through an initiation. The only way to become, to be an artist was through an initiation, basically. Sorry, I'm just playing with my my screen here, and I'm not able to get what I'm trying to get. Okay, it doesn't matter. So the only way to be an artist was to go through initiation, because the initiation process was meant to help you truly understand your role, but also help you become a master. And as a master, you had to understand the power of what you were creating for your community, because an artist has to have a deep understanding of how they shift the vibration of the people in their community. You have a big responsibility as an artist, because you are shifting some people's vibration, people's frequency. You are giving them energy that is changing their vibration and changing how they feel, who they are, and in the moment where they have an encounter with you, but even beyond that. And that takes me to the reason why we are here together, reason why we are doing this, because we are right now experiencing a time when we have been asked to apply what we call social distancing. Social distancing does not mean social isolation. People confuse the two. You don't have to be isolated to do social distancing. That's one thing. Other thing is this. Connection is not a physical thing. Like, I can be in a room full of people and yet feel isolated, feel alone, you see? And yet I can also be in the privacy of my own apartment and feel connected to everyone. So the one thing has nothing to do with the other. So we can be deeply connected to each other and yet still be physically isolated or physically distant from one another. And when you embrace as an artist, you embrace your role as an artist, as a healer, you are an artist again, by the way, because again, you have that power, you have that ability to connect with everything. And everybody has that power, of course, to connect with everything, but it is enhanced or magnified in the artist. That there's also a danger to that. You know, the degree to which you have the ability to be extremely connected is also the same degree to which you have the ability to be completely disconnected. You can't have one without the other. We live in a world of duality. If you have a high, you have a low, etc., etc. You know, you've heard that enough. But we have to be aware of that. So the artist community especially is at risk of that. So we have that capacity of being deeply connected to everything and everyone around us. And we have the capacity also to be completely disconnected from everything. But once we know that we have that power, it really puts everything back into perspective, and it gives us the power also to make sure to apply our own practices to make sure that we stay connected. For me, by the way, I live on my own now. I live alone in my apartment. So during this time of physical isolation, I don't have people around me. I don't live with people that I can connect with. And yet, even when I don't talk to people outside, I really do not feel alone. And I realized that a long time ago, when I would hear of people who were feeling so alone, so lonely, so disconnected, and all of that. A long time ago, when I started to do what I do as an artist, as a performer. But as a performer, even then, I knew that my role was not to entertain people. My role was to come together and bring comfort to people, to remind them that we are all connected, to help them experience what I call the spirit of the village, to help them feel connected, to help them feel that they belong, and to help them feel a warmth inside of them. But because I was also involved with people who did not feel that way on a regular basis, it made me wonder how come I was not really feeling that same kind of disconnection as everybody else. And I realized that it was because of the place where I was coming from. It was because I had a different foundation inside of me. And that's where resilience comes from. Because you have to build your resilience on a strong foundation. If you create everything from on shaky grounds, it is whatever you create will be only as strong as whatever foundation you had created. So I had a strong foundation from my culture of origin. We live a more connected way of life. And it's not just physical connection, of course, because yes, in this time, these weird times that we are living right now at the time of the pandemic is also challenging in many African countries, simply because of the way that we live. Something that has been a strength for us throughout the ages now might be potentially something that is going to be detrimental for us because of the way we live together. But there's always something great and not so great in any of our practices. But that foundation that we have of a strong connection with everything, everyone around us, and also everything around us is also what is giving us that foundation to feel that we are not alone, to feel like we belong, and to feel like we are constantly connected to everything and everyone around us. And so that resilience that we are talking about, well, in order to build it, you have to be aware of your foundation. You have to redefine your role as an artist. You have to choose that role, because that is also the purpose of an initiation, to help you be in a place where you choose this consciously. You choose where you are, you choose to continue what you do because you understand what it means, what it entails. As an artist, you're not just here to entertain people. You are here to change their vibration, but it has to start with yours. You have to make sure that you are in the right place to do that. And so let me give you a couple of tips to help to do that, because this is what we do back home. Whenever I teach, especially when I teach my healing dances, mostly to women, to audiences of women, I explain to them that our first dancers in my culture were healers, and spiritual leaders. For example, when if you know a little bit of some of the things that happen in South Africa, the culture in South Africa, they have what they call the sangomas. The sangomas are the traditional healers. And the sangomas, in order to raise the healing energy that allows them to heal their community, they have to dance. They have to dance because it is believed that that healing energy comes from the feet, comes from the ground, and it rises up. That is why, in general, in African culture, when we dance barefoot. It's not because we're too poor to afford shoes. This is a total misunderstanding of what this is. This has been about all along. Our ancestors understood that being connected to nature helped them heal in so many ways, helped them balance their energy level. Whatever they needed, they could get it from nature in many different ways. And they could also get it from the ancestors who were there to help support their communities in their daily life, as I was mentioning earlier. That's why our drums and most of our instruments are made out of made with natural sources. And so our drums, it is believed that in some cultures that our drums are the voices of our ancestors. Every tribe, every culture in Africa has their own spiritual instruments. In Cameroon, for example, we have an instrument called the mvet, M-V-E-T. The mvet is such an important element in a certain tribe in Cameroon, because it is a vehicle from which the ancestors are going to share the healing. When we dance together, when we sing together, we are creating how do you call that? A greater level of energy that reaches beyond just this plane, this reality. We bring our ancestors in, we bring nature in, and we are creating something together. And so, in the spirit of that, I'd like to share a song with you. It's interestingly enough, it's a song that I was taught not long ago. In November, I was in Hawaii and I met a beautiful community of people there. And one of the women, sorry, her name escapes me from now for now. But interestingly enough, she was actually from Canada, and her sister lives in Vancouver. Her sister used to take African dance classes with me. We found that out completely by chance. It was very interesting, and she taught me a song that she had been taught a long time ago. She thought that maybe I knew where the song came from and I could understand the language. And no, I don't know where the song comes from. My guess, because of just the words, my guess is that it's either an Eastern African song or Southern African. Southern Africa is not just South Africa. Zimbabwe is in Southern Africa, for example. So the words are these ones. So very simple, straightforward. Teya, the way I write it phonetically, simply T-E-Y-A, Teya, Hambe. Hambe, the way I will write it, H-A-M-B-E. That's all you need to know. Teya, Hambe. So this is how the song goes. And it is a gratitude song. It's a song that says thank you to Mother Earth, which is very, very appropriate. And I find that when I sing, it just raises my energy. When, sorry, I feel like I have a little something that is tickling my throat. So, Teya Hambe. It goes like this. Teya Hambe, Mama Teya Hambe. 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 Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. So sing with me now. If you're all in the comfort of your home, nobody is listening to you. Even if you are with people at home, just sing with them together, okay? Let's start together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Teya Hambe, Mama Teya Hambe. 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 Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Mama, Mama Teya Hambe. Yes? See how you feel now after you sang. I'm sure you felt the vibration. When I sing, I do feel the vibration. Right now, my hands are tingling, for example. It's the same thing if I'm dancing. I'm sure those of you are in the theater business. It's the same, when you are on stage, and especially after the stage, you have that deep buzzing. The buzzing is because you raised your vibration, but you did not raise it just for you. You also raised it for everybody around you. You have to understand the power that you have. You have to understand it within you to begin with. It starts with you and it reaches out, to the outside world. That is why you have such a big responsibility. You shift people's vibration, starting with your own. So in order to build resilience, you have to have that foundation inside of you. You have to know that you're not alone. You have to know that you have tools inside of you and available to you, well, outside of you, of course. So one of the quickest way for me, just sing. Singing is, for us, we sing to also comfort the soul. When you sing, you are comforting the soul. You feel better. You see, and the song doesn't have to have any meaning, by the way, because often when I share songs with an audience, often people ask me, what does it mean? I always say to them that it's irrelevant. And also in my culture, we have a lot of songs that we believe that the meaning of the song often is determined by your intention, the intention of whoever is singing. And to give you a good example, think about um, a baby. When you have a baby and your baby is crying and you try to comfort the baby, you are going to sing to comfort the baby. And it works. The baby doesn't understand the words, so it doesn't matter really what you're singing, but your intention is to comfort the baby, and it works. It's the same with adults. You see, the soul is the same soul, whether when we are babies and when we are, 70 years old, it's still the same soul, and the soul experiences life also through us, through our own experience. And so when we sing, we comfort the soul. We go much deeper than just the mind. So for us, it is important to sing. Singing together, singing for yourself is the same thing. Dancing is another thing too. And when I say dancing, I could just say movement. We need to move our bodies. We especially during these times of we live in a culture where we do so many things behind the computer, behind the desk. And so it's important to remember to move around. In the old days, in many African villages, when people were going to the field, they were accompanied by drummers. And the drummers were there to give energy to the workers. Because when you walk, you're doing something monotonous. You're planting, you're walking the soil. At some point, you get tired, and so you need that lift in energy, that shot of energy. And even in places where they did not necessarily do that, well, at the end of the day spent at the field, they will come together in the village, and now they will actually celebrate. They will play music and sing and dance. It was not just for entertainment. It was designed to replenish, to recharge the energy that they had used as they were walking. Because again, we understood how important, the act of singing and dancing, playing music, all of those, those vibrations, they were important to lift the people, to lift them and to make them feel, how do you say that, feel nourished again, nourished of energy, not just, we need nourishment that is beyond just what we eat to bring fuel in our bodies. We need also fuel for our soul so that we can function better. And we take it from a cultural perspective in Africa. We take all that fuel from these connections that we established. In many traditional cultures, actually, those cultures are based upon the promise that the individual is meant to live and flourish within a community. So again, community connection is not just physical connection. It is the connection that we can feel. So what is really a community is not just, as I said before, the people around you. The quality of your relationship, it is determined by the quality the quality of your life, from a cultural perspective. The quality of, we believe, what I learned when I was a child in my country was that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our relationships. And those relationships are not just the physical, friendly relationships that we have with one another. You see, when, for example, I teach, when I teach in schools, I love being in schools and teaching the kids from a young age to learn to see things in a different way, from a different perspective. Also bringing them a different story of Africa than the one that they typically see in the media. And I teach them how we greet each other, and I explain the greeting. And often the kids are going to ask me, how do you say goodbye? Well, in my language, for example, we do not say goodbye. And in Cameroon in general, even when we speak French, because French is my first language, in Cameroon, we have both languages as the official languages, just like Canada, French in English. But the French part is much bigger than the English speaking part in Cameroon. We also have many, many tribes, and each tribe has its own dialect. But when we interact with one another, we have, and then when we're about to say goodbye, we can say au revoir, goodbye, in French or in English, but we also add this. In French, on va dire, on est ensemble. In my language, we say, sono sabisa. Sono sabisa means, on est ensemble means we are together. So because in my language, in many of our traditional dialects in my country, in other countries across Africa, we don't say goodbye. We say we are together. What does it mean? It means the moment we separate from one another physically, the connection does not end there. We are still together. On est ensemble. We are together. So I could be in my village. Somebody can be in Yaoundé, in the capital. We are still together. And so we live from that foundation with that knowledge that we are together. So you can be alone deep down in the forest, walking the soil in your own field, and yet you are connected to everybody. If you start feeling lonely, because it doesn't mean that we never feel lonely. I mean, typically I don't feel lonely, but I'm sure I've had my moments. I can't remember the last time I did, but I'm sure I do have my moments. All I need to do is sing, because singing will actually connect me to everybody. First of all, to everybody who's ever sang this song, because remember, it's an energy thing, but it will also connect me to the ancestors who started to sing this song, because this song, the energy, the vibration, that transcends dimensions. So when we sing in our traditions, in our villages, when we dance, we bring the ancestors in. We sing together, we sing with them, we dance with them. The moment we start creating sound, creating rhythm, vibrations, it's an invitation for them to come and be with us. We say that in our traditions, we say that you do not talk to your ancestors the way you talk to your neighbors. It means that you can't use this language. You can't just say, okay, hi ancestors, this is what I want to bring. Yes, you can do that, but you go deeper. You sing to connect with them at a deeper level. You dance to connect with them at a deeper level. You play music. You tell stories. These stories that are the traditional stories, for example, there's also the same thing. They have that vibration. So in order for us to cultivate community connections, we do not need to be together. In order to build resilience, you have to come from a strong foundation. A foundation that you can decide. You have to decide. Nobody can give it to you. It's not possible. I can talk as much as I want. We are going to be entertain one another and another, where we can sing together. But until you accept it yourself, from as if you had gone through an initiation process, until you accept your role beyond entertainment, it's going to be difficult for you to feel that you have resilience inside of you. And so you need to start with the foundation that you have, the reason why you became an artist. And the role of the artist is, and I'm singling this out, not just because we are the community that this is going out to, is the community of artists, is because, as I said before, everybody has that ability to connect, of course. We all came here with that, but it's a lot more developed in the artist. The artist has their antennas may be more sharpened to connect with the invisible world. We also understand that we live in a world where what is visible is created by what is invisible. And the artist has that unique ability to connect with what is invisible. Connection is not something tangible that you can touch, and yet we feel it. We know that it is here, it exists. Inspiration is not something that you can touch, and yet the artist has to be so connected with their intuition, with their inspiration, you see, with all of that. It is not something that you can just make up like this. It doesn't come from something tangible. Even if you are inspired by something that you see outside, there's still that invisible connection that allows that allows you as an artist to pick up something there, that you can pick that up better than anyone else, because your antennas are sharpened more than anybody else. So I want to check in with Kenji to see if it's time for us to do our Q&A, to take a few questions. Kenji?
Thank you so much. That was, I wrote down so many notes as well. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. I was, as you were talking, one of the many things I wrote, we don't say goodbye. It's still together, and they might not know what community is, but it still exists. And I think that those kinds of things are really, really good things to remember, is that even if we can't eloquently say the words, that it still exists. Like the community does exist. It's out there, and it doesn't always have to be said, right?
And that's the reason why an artist is really a translator. You see, they are going to be able to say the things that other people might be feeling, but they don't know, they don't have words for it. Often the artist is going to interpret that and provide them with a way maybe to feel, to catch onto what they were feeling, even if the artist is not saying that with words. Sometimes with a piece of art, with a sculpture, you feel something that you can't explain, but you feel something, but you don't know, and yet you know. So there's a difference between knowledge and knowing, and that's the good example with community. My elders, they don't know the definition of community, and yet they know community.
There's a few comments coming in around, like one person saying, my soul has been refreshed and I'm reminded of the meaning of my journey. And you were just talking about working in schools, and I've done some work in schools as well, and there's something interesting about working with children, about how how as adults we need to unlearn things. We need to unpack things that we've learned over the years, and we hold a lot of either tension or hold a lot of our own understandings and of our own experiences. What, in terms of your experience working with kids versus working and having conversations with adults, are there things that you find inspiring or interesting that you've learned from children, specifically?
Yes, well, first of all, they're always so blunt and so honest. So I had many years ago when I was touring with my friend Yoro Nukusi. He's also a musician here in Vancouver. Whenever we do I do shows, and I make an effort to give them an opportunity to ask questions. Sometimes we don't have time because we are having such a great time that we go over time. But when we do have time for questions, we hear the most interesting questions. And one time, and this again the difference between adults and children. One time, a kid raised his hands. So he was maybe around 6, 7 at the most. And the question was this: in Africa, do people walk on all fours? Right away, oh my goodness, the teachers were horrified. No, it's, oh, sorry. And I said, no, please wait. Because you can't shut down a child when they have a question. You have to first understand, where the question comes from. And I said, no, it doesn't, I'm not offended by the question. It comes from a child. So, but before I answer this, I want to understand why you asked the question. Where is this coming from? This is what the kid said. He said, well, your hands are white and your feet are also white. The bottom of your feet are also white because I was dancing barefoot. And he said, but your skin is dark, it's brown. So I thought that maybe it's white because you walk like this so that it doesn't get, dirty or brown by. And I was so fascinated by that. I said, you know what? Wow, I've never thought of this. This is so smart. See, this was so smart. It was a very innocent question. If I had stayed with the teacher, I would have been, well, the teacher was horrified. They were really embarrassed by the question. And I found that, no, this question was actually refreshing. It was very smart. It wasn't a question to be insensitive in any way. And I was very grateful that he asked the question. It allowed me to answer and to realize that you're right. Because he said this, what he said was that my hands were white like his. And that's when it gave me an opportunity to say, yes, like you. No, we are the same in so many ways. And it's not the color of the skin. Maybe the hands are white here this way to remind us that we are the same at the end of the day. You see? So I love teaching the kids because of that innocence. But you know what I've also learned working with kids, and this is, in a sense, a little bit worrisome for me, that right from a very young age, they are already conditioned in so many ways you have no idea. One time, not actually very long ago, I was in Francophone school, and we were explaining some of our traditions, but also I was explaining the fact that, yes, I talk a lot about the village in Africa, but it doesn't mean that we only have villages. We also have cities and everything where, kids are just like here. They have iPads and phones and stuff like this. The one child was so adamant that it was not possible. He was so angry that he left and he went on the corner, pouting, because we presented something that was completely different from what they had been taught about Africa. He could not accept that in Africa there were kids who had shoes and who had cell phones and who had iPads and everything that and video games, everything that he has here. This kid, literally, he was not even 10. The kid was maybe around 8 or something like that. And I thought, wow, as at this age, you are already so strongly conditioned to believe one story of Africa than even I, coming from Africa, telling you something that comes from where I come from, you won't believe me. You won't accept that. So thankfully, this is not what, generally speaking, I'm able to show the kids how you can actually see a reality, just one-sided reality, and present it as a general reality. I have a good example that I use with kids, and I started also to use it with adults, and they really get it.
The continuing on the children theme, one of the questions is around teenagers, because it is a different kind of relationship with teenagers. And do you have any recommendations or ideas around how to reach teenagers as parents, especially as we talk about building a village and building families and connection?
Absolutely.
What do you think about that age range?
Okay, so it is only when I started to when I was in France that I learned about this thing about the how do you say that, you have that expression here in North America. When you become a teenager now, it's a difficult time in the relationship between the parents and the teens. When I was a child, and it was still true, it's still true to a certain degree today, although it really has changed. In the last 20 years, mostly the last 10 years, things have shifted around a lot because, of course, of the technology now, the communication means that we have at our disposals. But when I was a child, when I was a teenager, and when I was a young adult, it was still the same. The young people in our communities, they were looking up to the elders. They wanted to become like elders. The elders were basically the standard. And it was something that was, how do you say it was something that you looked forward to. Becoming old was something that you looked forward to because it gave you a different position in the community. You were able to contribute better, more in your community because you were an elder. That is because you were coming from a place of experience. And so from that place, everybody could come to you and ask advice and everything that it entails. So you had a different position in the community. And so what we were looking forward to was to become like our elders. Now, in the Western world, you want to become like the popular person. So whether it's another teen or a rich adult, you just want to become like this. It has nothing to do with their level of wisdom or anything like this. So that's one thing that also differentiates, us in the way we live in our culture. The other way is that in our traditions, we do everything together. So because community means just that, community is everybody, the children, the parents, the elders, the ancestors, everyone, different age groups. So whenever we had celebrations in my village, when we had anything happening in the community, whether it was funerals or weddings, everybody was involved. I recently came back from a trip to Cameroon, and we had a dowry ceremony. And at the end of the ceremony, then now it was the celebration time. Well, the celebration started maybe around midnight, and the kids were still there and awake. And after the girls, because when the celebration starts, in a dowry ceremony, the girls own the stage basically. Once they finish dancing and they left, oh, you saw the kids coming and taking over basically. That is because we do everything together. So our songs, we don't have celebrations for just the young people, or etc. We have the celebrations for everybody. So it means that we are more used to having that connection to one another back and forth. But we also have something else, which is what I do when I go and visit schools and I teach African dance, when I do an African dance residency. So I teach different dances, depending on the age group. And typically, traditionally, typically what I do is that all my dances, a lot of the dances are created. I created my own dances based on some of the dances and movements we do back home, but also based on some of the values that I want to share with the kids. And so when it comes to teenagers, there's one dance in particular that I like to share with them. And they get it. It's just that it takes me a while to explain the dance within the context of the values that are behind and the dance itself and every single step. It is a dance called Soul, which comes from the Ewe people of West Africa. And it is a dance that was in that tribe that they would use to teach the young people in their community from a young age what life is about and what is expected of them as members of the community. You see, when you have a sort of kind of roadmap, you don't know what life is going to be for you. But when you have a sense of what life is about and what is expected of you as a member of any community, it allows you to be maybe to be grounded in something else. So when you have a sense that around you, everybody acknowledges that you're here, you have a purpose, a very specific purpose that, we may or may not know, but it is there. First, you know that there's something that you here with, your life matters. You have something of value to contribute. And every single step in that dance is designed to teach you something, starting with our connection to the land, starting with the tradition of gratitude. We have to be grateful for what we have. And we talk about community, the connection. But most importantly, that dance talks about the purpose. And it teaches every single child that they all came with a purpose, that this purpose is meant to permeate every aspect of their life. And then they have a responsibility to share that purpose, because it is something, the gift that they have is something that benefits everybody, not just them. So it gives them a sense of having something important in them. So I believe that in the way that we connect with the teenagers today, we give too much power to the outside world, and we let them teach our children. Back home, the responsibility to teach the child, there's this expression now, in the Western world, that it takes a village to raise a child, which of course comes from African culture. But the problem is the Western world has started to use a lot of these sayings just because they have an intellectual understanding. But I don't think that they really understand what it means. Literally, when I was a child, at the time, so I don't know, well, it still happens, but I don't know if it happens still in the same way. As a child in Cameroon, so I didn't grow up in the village, I grew up in the city, but we would go back in the village on a regular basis. And it was a common thing to, if I had, for example, many children, I could give one of my child to, someone else, another woman in the village who didn't have a child. This child will become her child as much as the child was my child. And so we don't have an ownership of the children. We don't have, also, we don't hold on to, because of that, we don't hold on physically to the child in the same way. The emotional attachment that we have, the love that we have for the child, goes beyond the sentimental attachment. And so the child belongs to the entire community. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the entire community to raise the child. When a teenager, because again, we're talking about the teens, when a teenager does something wrong in our culture, in our traditions, we do not accuse the teenager directly. We accuse the community, we accuse the whole tribe. Not even the parents, just the parents, it's everybody. We say, oh, how do these people raise their children? How come they did this? Because we do not believe that the child alone or the teen has a responsibility. It's everybody. And I think if we started to come from that perspective, it will be a different thing. But I will end with this. You connecting with a child, especially with a teenager, it has to take more than just talking to the teenager and telling them what to do and what not to do. Because first of all, they are at that crucial time when they have to decide which way to go. They are torn between, this is a place where they're the most torn because they're at the threshold of becoming adults. And so they are in that place where they are going to decide what kind of adults they are going to be. There's what they feel is right, who they are inside of them, and there's what they're being pulled and that they're being called to be from the outside world, and including their parents. That is why in our culture we have those rites of passage, because if you are born, my tribe is called Maka. If some in my tribe, we no longer do the rites of passage, but many tribes in my country still do that. So if I am born in my village as a Maka child, yes, I learned the values of my child, and yes, of my tribe, sorry, and I grew up with them in me. But at some point, I have to decide, I have to choose. That's why, again, the rite of passage is going to be about. It's going to give me an opportunity to decide that, yes, I accept those values that have been taught in my village. I'm not just a passive bystander. And so tomorrow, I can't blame my community or anybody else, because I also chose those values. I chose this way of life and all of that. And so I have a tangible opportunity to do that. The teenagers nowadays, they don't have an opportunity to do that. If we start understanding, there's no clear, direct one answer to this, because it's going to be a process, but that process has to start with the right understanding, and starting with getting into that process of reaching out to them in such a way that they understand that they are being understood beyond the words, because they often don't understand that intellectually. They're still in this world where they feel that they don't have the words. But if we can accompany them into feeling, into validating their feeling, even we don't have the words either, but just holding that space, as we say, you can hold the space simply, literally by singing. This goes such a long way. Singing together as a family, for example, goes a long way in my experience.
That's great, thank you. So just in terms of time, I want to give you an opportunity to, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk just for 1 minute about the 30-day challenge that you have on your website.
Yes, so I wanted to invite everybody to go to my website, jackyyenga.com, and as Kenji was saying in the description of this webinar series, there is a link to my website. I have created a 30-day village challenge. I created that a while back. It basically runs on autopilot, but it's an opportunity for people. For 30 days, every single day you receive something that is going to inspire you to reach out, to connect in a more village way, let's say. Of course, it was created at a time before COVID-19. So you're going to see sometimes some invitations to come together to have a meal with the people that are in your community, your friends, for example. Well, you can still do that. You don't have to receive your friends physically with you. Technology today allows us to do things from a distance. So for example, you can book a dinner time with your friends and say, okay, tomorrow, a week from now at 8 p.m., let's have dinner together. Let's all eat so and so, or each person is going to do their own specialty. And then we can, connect through these means, technology, and eat together. Or even if we say, okay, we're not going to see each other eating, but we're still going to eat together at that time, you are going to know, in the privacy of your home, that your friends are eating at the same time. And you can also share on the phone something. So you're going to be able to adapt whatever it is that the 30-day village challenge is going to invite you to do on any given day. But it's going to really allow you for 30 days to live a more village connected life.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for that. And so just before we leave, for everybody else, just a reminder that we have a webinar next Wednesday with Charmaine Hammond, who's going to be speaking about organizational resilience, so really specific about organizations. And then on April 14th, we have Mercedes Baines, who's a psychotherapist, who's going to use an experiential webinar to kind of guide you through how to manage painful emotions while living through crisis. So thank you again, Jacky. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with all of us through this time. And I look forward to working with you again.
Really, thank you, Kenji. It really was my pleasure. Thank you so much to everybody who is watching this, following this. And please remember really to take care of yourself first. The best way that you can help your community is to take care of yourself, take care of your needs, and then you come from that place of already being nourished. And remember just to sing for yourself. If you are in theater, just play for you, tell stories just for you, just to make you feel better, but keep remembering really the strength that you have inside of you, and the responsibility that you have not just towards your community, but towards yourself also, okay? So on that note, I will say Akiba. Akiba in Cameroon is our way of saying thank you. So Akiba to all of you, Kenji, to the Greater Vancouver Professional Theatre Alliance, and to all the other art organizations who are doing amazing work during this time. So keep doing what you do. Okay.
Great. Thank
Till
you,
next time.
Jackie.
Bye. Stay
Thanks, everybody.
connected. Bye
Okay,
bye.
bye.